Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I rise today to highlight some of the many areas where people in my community are being failed, let down by this Morrison government, and the very real impact that that is having on their lives. Deputy Speaker, I am sure that I am not the only one in this place whose office is currently inundated with NDIS participants and their families who are desperate for help. It is an absolute indictment on this government and the way they run the NDIS that I currently essentially employ a staff member full-time whose entire role is taken up with helping participants and families navigate the NDIS system. This system is just not working as it should. And in fact, at the moment, the stories I'm hearing, the experiences that people are relaying to me, is one of parents lying awake at night with anxiety about what's going to happen when their child's plan comes up for a review. It's actually of families breaking down because of the level of stress and anxiety they are carrying. And these are stories in one electorate alone. Imagine what is happening across our country because of this Morrison's government's failures to take the NDIS seriously, to resource the scheme as they should, and to respect people with disability, their families and their carers. Deputy Speaker, some of the themes of what I'm hearing from NDIS participants and their families are of parents overwhelmed and in some cases emotionally beaten by the administrative barriers that are there to getting support for their children. I'm hearing about long delays in decision-making, which sometimes, but not always, can be overcome when my office intervenes and makes a representation. But it shouldn't take that. It shouldn't take people needing to go to their local federal MP to be able to navigate a government system and get the support they need for a child with disability or for an adult with disability, for people in our community. I'm hearing from parents who are at a point where they have actually just decided to disengage, that the emotional trauma, the efforts they are going to is not worth it. And so they are actually giving up on the system. What an indictment. And of course, like so many around this country, I am hearing of packages that are being slashed by tens of thousands of dollars after a review and the very real consequences that is having, particularly on children. I do want to go into some of the specifics of what families are raising with me because I think it's important that they are aired in this place, but I'm not going to use names or any identifying factors because those families have rightly asked me to respect their privacy. So I can tell this place about a boy under 10 with autism spectrum disorder. He's had a reduction of tens of thousands of dollars on a previous plan. His mother said that when she was needing to interact with an NDIS planner, those interactions came at times when she was caught unprepared and she felt off guard, and that had a negative impact on the outcome of her plan review. Since the plan has been slashed by tens of thousands of dollars, the boy's therapists and the boy's school have observed an escalation of concerning behaviours and a regress in his general coping. His mother says, "The lack of empathy and person-centred approach exhibited by the NDIA towards my son and I have been cruel and dehumanising. This decision keeps him, disregards his needs, shuts him down and keeps him separate from society. The lack of funding and formal support has left me having to decide which of my children's needs are more important. Without these supports, I must make heartbreaking decisions as a mother that could drastically change the future of my children." She says, "We are on the brink of a monumental breakdown as a family unit due to the sudden and extreme reduction in funding without explanation from the NDIA, despite us repeatedly asking them for a reason behind the decision. My family and I are literally drowning emotionally, physically and financially as a direct result of the sheer disregard and lack of support we've received from the NDIA. That should not be the case. This is not what the NDIS was set up to do. It was set up to give children with disability, to give adults with disability, to give their families the opportunity for these people to live the best lives possible. Instead, it is causing families to break down, and that is on this Morrison government. A participant whose wife contacted my office in December last year because, despite submitting plans and an application for a bathroom modification in March last year, they'd heard nothing from the NDIS. So they submitted the plans in March, By December, they still had heard nothing back from the NDIS, and all the while her husband's mobility was declining. In her email to my office, she said, "We don't usually send complaints, but this time I felt I needed to." Well, absolutely fair enough. How is that reasonable that she was waiting from March to December for a decision from the NDIS on this bathroom modification, which had serious consequences for her husband's mobility? A mother was told by the NDIA that there were no funds left in the plan of her son with a severe intellectual disability and complex behaviours. This meant he could no longer access his carers, therapists, day programs, or any of his support services. This also meant his family were unable to attend or perform their usual occupations due to having to take on the role of full-time carers. Obviously, this was a high stress level for the family, and there were wellbeing and safety concerns for both the NDIS participant and for the family, given the extreme complex behaviours. This woman said that it meant limited access to the community because of these complex behaviours, and there were safety concerns for them. She was ringing the NDIA daily to try and get this addressed, but she didn't hear back. And again, in desperation, she had to turn to my office for support. Deputy Speaker, as I said, it shouldn't be like this. The NDIS is a great system. It could be an even better system that supports all of these families, that doesn't tie them up in red tape, that doesn't send them down a bureaucratic rabbit hole that they can't get out of without contacting their federal MP, that doesn't leave mothers lying awake at night thinking, well, which kid can I prioritise? What's the impact of my family? Are we all going to fall apart because I can't understand what's going on here? That doesn't mean that children are suddenly ripped away supports that they've had and families are left to deal with complex behaviours on their own. As I said, the NDIS is a great Labor legacy, but it should not be operating in the way it does under this Morrison government. It's an urgent problem and it does need to be addressed urgently. Unfortunately, again, in the past fortnight in Parliament, we've seen nothing from the Morrison government that would address any of these issues in the NDIS and in the way they operate the scheme. So I call on them today to do the work. Listen to the families that I'm sure are in communities on the other side as well. Make sure the system works as it should. It just shouldn't be this hard for all of these families. The NDIS should not be putting extra burden and extra complexity on people. Deputy Speaker, of course, it's not just the NDIS. We also know that aged care is in crisis in this country. And of course, once again, this government's response has been abysmal. Every elderly Australian should get quality care. All of the amazing people who are currently working in our aged care system should be supported. But that's not what's happening under this government. And in fact, this week, last week again from this government, have we been debating how we fix aged care? Has this government brought into this Parliament urgent plans, urgent legislation for how we fix aged care? They have not. We got an announcement about the ADF needing to come in because the government had failed to fix the system we really are at crisis point. But now we know there's also an issue about the pace at which the ADF are being rolled out into nursing homes. And obviously using defence in nursing homes is a short-term plan. There is a deep structural problem in aged care at the moment, and that means that older people in these aged care facilities are not getting the dignified quality of life that they should. Deputy Speaker, I've spoken in this place before about one of the most heartbreaking things I've had to do as a local member was 2 years ago when I had to speak to families in my community who lost loved ones in aged care at that stage of the COVID pandemic. It was a horrible thing for me to have to do, but it was obviously devastating for those families to have to understand what had happened and why their loved ones had died. That was 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. We've had 2 years. We've had an entire royal commission, and still this government fails aged care. This government seems comfortable with people dying in aged care. This government seems comfortable with people not being able to visit their loved ones for months and months because homes are locked down. This government seems comfortable with overstressed workers who are carrying a very, very difficult burden that they should just not have to if this government would do its job. Well, I want to assure everyone in my community, Labor gets this. We know that aged care is in crisis. We know that this system needs the attention and support that it should have, that families in my community should not be worrying about their parents in aged care. They should know that those parents are safe and are having the quality of life that they deserve. Aged care workers in my communities should not be doing 30-hour shifts, trying to run from bed to bed because there just aren't enough people in the facility. This is not acceptable. We talk a lot in this place about respecting older Australians, about the work they do to build this country. Well, the way we honour that, the way we recognise that, is to have an aged care system that works. I urge the Morrison government to make this a focus because Australians are watching. Australians know that you have failed, that you have left a system in crisis, and that more than 2 years into a pandemic, you have failed to make the changes we need. In fact, the minister responsible, instead of talking about what's going on in the system, the minister responsible went to the cricket, not just once, but for 3 days.
Shame.
Unbelievable, actually. Unbelievable if you think about, again, all the families in my electorate calling my office asking, can you help me get in and see my mum? I can't understand why I can't yet. I'm really worried because my dad hasn't had his booster shot yet and it's been pushed back for 3 weeks. Can you help me understand why? The minister wasn't providing my office with information around that. He was at the cricket. And this Prime Minister seems comfortable with that, despite being asked numerous times this week, last week in this Parliament, whether he retains confidence in his Minister for Aged Care Services. Scott Morrison seems to be fine with that. He's not taking any action against that minister. Deputy Speaker, this points to a pattern from the Morrison government. A pattern of not looking out for everyone in our community. A pattern of not caring when the things that they are responsible for the things that we should be able to rely on in our community, break, when they haven't been up to the job. This government hasn't stepped in and worked it out. This Prime Minister hasn't held a hose. He hasn't done his job. And that effect is being felt still in all of our communities, in my community, with families lying awake at night, wondering what they're going to do with their young child with a disability, wondering how they're going to withstand the pressures that they're feeling at the moment. In my community, with families lying awake at night, wondering if their mum in aged care is safe, wondering when they'll be able to get in and see her again. This goes to the heart of what sort of country we want to be, of what sort of society we want to be. Do we want to be as a society where we leave people who are elderly, people who have disability on the edges? Or do we want to be a society that makes sure that everyone is treated with dignity, that all of us know that no matter what situation we end up in, we will be supported as we should be? We will have a government that cares for us, that understands that our community, our society functions best when we respect everyone in it. And most importantly, when we have a government that just does its job, that doesn't go to the cricket when there's an aged care crisis, that does hold a hose, that's not playing the ukulele and, pulling out family stunts for a 60-minute special. A government that is interested in what's going on in people's lives in Australia and is concentrated on making those lives better. That is what a Labor government will provide to this country. And that is why we need an Anthony Albanese Labor government to fix the mess this government's left us in.
Thank you.